The call to worship this morning is from the work of the Reverend Cynthia Landrum. She writes, "Spirit of life and love, we gather together in different ways this morning. From computer screens, from telephones, we gather, reaching out across the wires and spaces, waving from a safe distance. To come together in religious community. From living room to front porch to car seat, we gather as we are able, ready to be of service to each other, to the world, ready to build a community of hope and of love as we face this bright morning. We are apart, but we are together, offering our love, our commitment, our hope, and our prayers in service to one another and this world. It is a new way, but an old way, that we come together in worship today." So good morning. My name is Patricia Hart. I am the developmental minister of this First Unitarian Universal Society of Burlington, and it is an honor and a privilege to welcome all of you to worship this morning, whether you are long-term members of this congregation or newcomers or friends of friends or people from anywhere in the world. We are so delighted that you're here so that we can worship together. The First Unitarian Universal Society is an inclusive, compassionate community which is creedless, meaning we do not have a list of beliefs that we insist everyone subscribe to. What we do care about is truth and love and justice and ourselves and every other person. We act as much as we can in line with our principles and our values, and we believe everything we do matters in the world. I'm talking to you from my home study. This is the room where I read and study and write most days, where I write lots of emails. And now it is the place where I speak to you as we keep one another safe by staying apart. I'm so grateful for all of the staff who helped to plan and produce this service, James Stewart and Sam Whitesell and Woody Fulton and Margo Whitcomb, plus Christina and Erica and David. I'm very grateful too to my beloved husband Peter, who is today my cameraman and always my moral support. It is a delight to create worship for all of you, for all of us. We're learning a lot, learning about how to do this, getting better all the time at this distance community thing. And your love and support and hope makes a difference. Thank you very much. It's time to light our chalice, as we do every Sunday, to mark the beginning of our worship together. As I light this small chalice, I hope that you will say together with me the words that we speak every week. We kindle this chalice flame to remind ourselves of the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment. And now we will have the reflection for all ages done for us by Margo Whitcomb.
Hello, friends and families. I'm Margo Whitcomb, Faith Development Assistant, and this is our reflection for today. Once, during a time of global pandemic, social distancing, and school closures, life was hard for all. For safety, long days were spent indoors without visiting others, giving up the usual hustle and bustle of comings and goings. One family of 5 siblings made the situation even more difficult. They were not able to get along or find agreement. They argued. They fought among themselves, and the days dragged on. One day, their mother lost patience with the bickering and constant fighting. She gathered the family and asked them, "When people around us are sick and suffering, and healthcare workers and others are sacrificing themselves serving our community, why must you treat each other this way? Can't you work together to make our time at home more pleasant? Why can't you get along?" But her words seemed to have no effect. So she instructed her children to go out and collect a bundle of sticks. Miraculously, the siblings did as they were instructed. They also managed to carefully avoid getting within 6 feet of anyone from outside their family they may have seen outdoors. The siblings gathered sticks and tied them in a medium bundle, which they then delivered to their mother, wondering what she would do with them. The mother took the bundle and said, "Now, let's see which of you is strong enough to break these sticks." First, the oldest tried, and though they were the strongest, they couldn't break the bundle. The second child tried and failed, as did the third and fourth. When it was her turn, the fifth child untied the bundle and carefully pulled out a single stick.
"Mom, I know why you asked us to break this bundle. When we fight amongst ourselves, we are like this single stem and break easily. But when we stick together, we are impossible to defeat."
The mother smiled and said, "That's right. Now more than ever, we need to bundle together and make each other strong." The children took their mother's wise lesson to heart. They put it into practice, letting go of their grudges, focusing on what they shared in common, appreciating each other's strengths, and working together. Well, some of the time, anyway. Thanks for listening.
Would you rest with me and one another for just a moment in a place of reflection? We all do this differently. For some of us, that means meditation or prayer, or maybe just noticing that we're breathing. First, this morning, we will listen and then call to mind our joys and sorrows, those in our own minds and hearts, and about the people and for the others we are thinking about, and then finish in shared silence. The reflection words this morning come from the Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron. She writes, "We can never know what will happen to us next. We can try to control the uncontrollable by looking for security and predictability, always hoping to be comfortable and safe. But the truth is that we can never avoid uncertainty. This not knowing is part of the adventure, and it's also what makes us afraid." So take a breath with me. Call up your own uncertainty, your fears for yourself, your fears for others. It might right now be a fear of getting sick. All of us share that fear, I think, or perhaps are feeling not so great today, which just adds to it. Also fears about unemployment, a loss of income, the lessening of one's ability to take care of yourself and of those you love. Or maybe a more general fear that nothing will ever be quite the same again. These fears are real. They don't go away if we try to ignore them. Call up to everything that is good in your life right now. Maybe something that was inspiring or beautiful that happened this week that you saw or heard about or experienced. Call up your gratitude for all those who, through their own courage and persistence and resilience, courageously make it possible for you and me and others to live, to be well, to eat, to have light and electricity and the internet and warmth. The joy of living in this beautiful place. These are real too. We cannot escape knowing, if we think about it for even a second these days, how much our lives are inextricably intertwined with everyone else's, everyone on earth. How much we depend on one another for our health and our safety and our possibilities. As you hold all of this tenderly, know that others are holding you too in their minds and hearts. Remember that though we are separate, we are not alone. None of us is alone. Let us be quiet together. Keep breathing. Keep feeling. As the worship associates say every Sunday, we are now moving into a deeper part of the service, of our worship, of our time together. And we do so in a spirit of meditation and also generosity, which is why we put the offering right in the middle of the service here, hoping that all of us will feel free and glad to be able to share something of our own resources to make this congregation possible. We're taking up an offering, though not in the normal way, but online. So you can go into your Realm account if you've activated it and make a gift that way. You can write a check. You can text your gift to the congregation. The number will be on the screen, or you can just go to the website, uussociety.org, and make a donation there. There are lots of different ways we can all give, and how much we give is much, much less important than the gesture of doing so. I'm so grateful for all of the hope and faith that makes these gifts likely and possible. And I'm grateful too that not just the gifts that are helping the congregation now at this point in this fiscal year, but the pledges that are coming in to support the offering budget, operating budget, that's what I want to say, the operating budget in the coming year. Already, and you know this, perhaps if you've read the e-news, already, even though for this whole campaign we have been not together in the meeting house, almost 40%, actually a little bit more than 40% of the households we hope might make a pledge have done so. And taken together, those pledges add up to more than $271,000, which is a little more than half of our overall goal. The generosity and the faith and the willingness and the confidence, it's inspiring, and I'm glad and grateful. The gifts and the pledges to support this congregation will now be gratefully received. And now that our offering has been taken up, we will dedicate it with the words that we say every Sunday. With gratitude, we dedicate these gifts in the service of our mission to inspire spiritual growth, care for each other and our community, seek truth, and act for justice. So wisdom is our theme during this apparently interminable month of March. I don't know about you, but I'm not feeling very wise. I have good moments, good hours, even when I think I know what needs to be done and even how to do it, but they don't really last. When life leads me into something unfamiliar and terrifying and I don't know what to do or even how to think, it can help me to imagine what it was perhaps like in some real time in the real past when life was also unexpected and terrifying for everybody. How did people respond? How did they know what to do? It might hold a clue for me, a little bit of wisdom. So imagine, if you would, with me, that we're at the end of the 1930s and the beginning of a terror that would become a war that would consume all of Europe and pretty much all of the world. A young Unitarian parish minister named Whitesell Sharp, his name was actually Whitesell, and his even younger wife, Martha, traveled from Massachusetts to the very heart of the chaos in Prague, Czechoslovakia. They brought with them their faith in God and in goodness, their courage, their common sense, and their confidence, and a certain amount of money donated by Unitarians in the United States who couldn't bear to do nothing and just sit by while people were in danger. The Sharps set out to save people. This quite remarkable trip did not change the course of history, though it certainly changed the direction of Whitesell and Martha Sharp's lives and their children's, not to mention the hundreds or even thousands of people whom they met and helped and sometimes even saved. It changed our lives a bit too, in a way, since their efforts helped to shape the purpose and self-understanding of the religious tradition that we now call Unitarian Universalism. Until a few years ago, the whole story was not well known outside of a few UURE programs. But in September 2016, PBS broadcast a Ken Burns production of a documentary entitled Defying the Nazis, The Sharps' War. Maybe you saw it. Maybe you know this story, but just in case, here's some background. In 1938, Adolf Hitler threatened to unleash a European war unless a border area of Czechoslovakia known as the Sudetenland was ceded to Germany, which is, horrifyingly, what the leaders of Britain and France and Italy agreed to in exchange for a pledge of peace from Germany. When this happened, Unitarians in the United States were stunned. Some of them had close ties to Czech Unitarian churches, especially the large church in Prague, served by the Reverend Norbert Čapek. They heard about hundreds of political dissidents, Jews and other refugees who were pouring into Prague from Germany and Austria and the Sudetenland. The Unitarians in Prague were overwhelmed and in danger. The American Unitarian Association decided something had to be done. Within a week, the AUA passed a resolution to explore creating a relief organization for refugees. $40,000 was raised, the equivalent of $650,000 today, to support the newly formed Commission for Service to Refugees. The Reverend Dr. Everett Moore Baker, who was the vice president of the AUA at that point, and who, coincidentally, 10 years later, helped to found the church in Cleveland that I served before I came to Vermont, Dr. Baker made a call to his minister and his minister's wife. He lived in Wellesley Hills, where the church was, and he called up Martha and Whitesell Sharp and asked them to take on the urgent, unclear, and certainly dangerous assignment of going to Prague to try to help. To, among other things, bring the money in cash, because there was no other way to get it there. He asked them because he knew they might say yes, unlike the 17 other ministers he had already asked, all of whom had turned him down. The Sharps' grandson, Artemis Jukowski, wrote that they were motivated by their faith and their moral outrage, motivated enough to decide to leave their congregation and even their two small children, who were at that point 7 and 2 years old. On February 4th, 1939, the Sharps set sail for Europe. They traveled to London, then Czechoslovakia, connecting with others who were developing a network to help people in danger get out of Nazi-controlled Europe. They began working as soon as they got to Prague, and they stayed right through the German invasion of Czechoslovakia. They registered refugees, taking them to embassies that might be helpful. They found scholarships or jobs for people who might then be able to emigrate more easily. They tried to get people out of prison, and they arranged travel to safer places like London and Paris and Geneva. Over the next 6 years, throughout the war, in Europe and on several trips that they made back to the United States, the Sharps worked to organize relief and emigration assistance. Martha escorted dozens of people from Czechoslovakia to England and Portugal, people who could not have gotten out by themselves, including journalists and political leaders and children whose parents had committed suicide. Over and over, Martha worked to help children emigrate. She doggedly battled bureaucracies to secure exit visas and transit permits and identity papers for hundreds of people. Whitesell, that upright pastor, became an expert at laundering money. They both worked in secret, frequently in danger, and at least once they were close to being arrested by the Gestapo. The Sharps understood much better than most people in America how many people would want and need to leave. They didn't know, because almost no one knew, how difficult leaving would become. Out of all of this, the Unitarian Service Committee was born, the USC. The USC helped several thousand people escape from Europe. Political refugees, people who had spoken out against Nazism in Germany or fascism in Spain, and whom other organizations were reluctant to help, as well as academics and scientists and intellectuals. An interesting detail of this story, the image of the flaming chalice that we light every Sunday and know as a symbol of Unitarian Universalism, it came from the early days of the USC. A simple design of a flaming chalice was put together by Hans Deutsch. He was an Austrian artist and also a refugee. It was just a two-dimensional image stamped on documents created by the USC to help Jewish refugees escape Nazi persecution. The idea was that it would make their paperwork look more official and maybe just slightly Christian. Eventually, of course, the flaming chalice image became Unitarian Universalism's official identity. So how many people did Whitesell and Martha save? It's impossible to know. Neither of them finished any memoirs. After the war, they rarely spoke, even to their family, about what they'd done. Artemis, their grandson, was in 9th grade several decades later in a school in New York City, and he was given an assignment. He needed to write a paper about moral courage, and to do that, he needed to find somebody who had done something to demonstrate moral courage. He didn't have any idea who that might be, and he went home and asked his mother, "Has anybody in our family ever done anything courageous?" And his mother, whose name was also Martha, looked at him and said, "Well, you could talk to your grandmother." He's been working on telling their story ever since. In the Sharps' own assessment of their actions and their daughters, they were ordinary people doing heroic things. They were wise and brave and dedicated. They were afraid. They doubted their strength and commitment. They made lots of not-so-great choices along the way. But they never lost their faith in humanity, despite the overwhelming evidence that people can be despicable and not worth the effort. What shall we take from this story? How is wisdom and courage showing up now? How is it needed in these days of coronavirus? Well, it takes courage to go out to work, and many are doing that every day because what they do is essential and because they can't afford not to. For many more of us, we're asked not to go out, to stay home, which may not take much courage, though it does take patience and persistence. The courage that's needed, I think, right now is the courage to face our grief at losing much of the normalness that sustains us, the things we did every day, stopping at the cafe for a cup of coffee or hanging out with people at the office or at the congregation. So much of what gives shape and purpose to our days is gone, along with our assumptions about what's true and safe. It is right to grieve the loss of touch, the comfort of a hug, the closeness of friends and family. We need to recognize the uncertainty that characterizes our days. Though many of us are fortunate enough to still count ourselves among the housed and unemployed, our grief for all those who are so much more affected and who are afraid and suffering, our grief is also real. It takes wisdom and courage to grieve. Wisdom is also required, though, in our refusing to give up on hope and joy. Joy and love and selflessness and beauty are all around us. And discovering and celebrating and sharing all that goodness wherever we find it may well be the salvation of our spirits and our communities. Maybe that's why I like the story of Martha and Whitesell Sharp, because it reminds me of goodness showing up in the midst of fear, of what lies at the heart of Unitarian Universalism, of our faith, an insistent faith in human beings and life, a deep humility in the face of beauty and devastation that is always around us. Let us now extinguish our chalice flame, saying together, we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and share with the world until we are together again. The benediction is from the Reverend Victoria Safford. Our mission is to plant ourselves at the gates of hope, not the prudent gates of optimism, which are somehow narrower, not the stalwart, boring gates of common sense, nor the strident gates of self-righteousness, which creak on shrill and angry hinges. People cannot hear us there. They cannot pass through. Nor the cheerful, flimsy garden gate of everything's going to be all right. But a different, sometimes lonely place, the place of truth-telling, about your own soul, first of all, and its condition, the place of resistance and defiance, the piece of ground from which you see the world both as it is and as it could be, as it will be. The place from which you glimpse not only struggle, but the joy of the struggle. And we stand there beckoning and calling, telling people what we are seeing, asking people what they see. Amen. Go in peace.